Started about 5:30 in the morning, and it took roughly 12 hours, which is a little longer than average, but it was complicated by a few things, unfortunately. The fact that getting my right lung out was the hardest one they've ever done in terms of actually pulling it out, just because of all the stickiness in our chest. They were literally scraping bits of the bottom of my right lung off the bottom of my chest, which of course caused a lot of internal bleeding. And I also had an encapsulated cavity in my right lung, which just happened to be full of staph, which meant that I got a massive staph infection into my bloodstream on the table. And if that wasn't enough, I also had multiple organ failure in there at some point. So, it was pretty much a case of everything that could have gone wrong kind of did. So, we get to a little bit later on, and I come out and I'm put on ECMO, which is bypass basically. It's just the word they use for it, and I forget what the letters ECMO mean, but I'm sure you can look it up. They couldn't put me on blood thinners, which they normally would, to stop you clotting up in the machine, just because, of course, I'd had so much internal bleeding, and they'd had to take me back into theatre several times to reopen me to stop a lot of the internal bleeding. And just generally, they just weren't expecting me to make it, because, well, let's face it, any one of those things could have killed me, and probably should have. But, that's the way it goes. But as much as my family were, just absolutely shit scared and whatnot, Mum just kept saying to herself, every hour's a good hour. And, they did well. They spent a lot of time in the waiting room in ICU, just kind of sitting around praying, and my 11-year-old brother raiding kept him busy by raiding the vending machine and whatnot. So I was in a coma for 6 days post-transplant, just because of the complications. Normally they only expect you to be about 1 or 2, but again, obviously I crashed pretty bad, so I had to stay in the induced coma for that long. And I was also on kidney dialysis, and had a lot of additional blood. I still actually am trying to find out exactly how much, but even when they woke me up after 6 days, I still remember them pumping another 2 units in. So obviously it was quite a lot. And there were about 30 or so odd electronic syringes being pumped into me at some point, with everything from adrenaline to, what's the word I'm looking at? Well, let's face it, everything, basically, 5 different antibiotics for the staph infection, and, basically, the kitchen sink, just everything being done externally. And of course, I gained 10 kgs during the op, just from the displaced fluid that you sort of take on. So, you can see here, it looks like I'm awake, but it's actually just the amount of fluid I retained was helping to just kind of push my eyes open. And of course, during surgery, I got something which is called a pneumothorax, which is basically you get a couple of holes in your new lungs, which can cause them to collapse. But in this case, obviously, having CF and having all the sticky stuff on your chest wall still obviously helped to keep them expanded and stuck up. But, and yeah, of course, it is a bit unusual to be told, hey, you have air in your chest. It's like, hello, air in my lungs, isn't that supposed to happen? But, in this case, it's actually air holes or air pockets between your lungs and your chest wall. So this is about a week post-transplant in the specialist ICU. I didn't sleep at all for the first 3 days, which, to me was no surprise, but they were sort of, trying to make me go back to sleep and whatnot. But from my point of view, kind of lying there, tube in my mouth and kind of hardly able to move or talk or whatever, it's like, well, you're doping me full of prednisone. I've been asleep in a coma for the best part of a week. I can't move, and you want me to go back to sleep. What am I missing? But all right. And of course, I, when I woke up, I was just automatically expecting to be in a lot of pain. But oddly enough, it was like, oh, okay, no pain, cool. I've got that epidural, and they were telling me about. But then Mum comes along and is like, well, you've actually been in a coma too long, and they haven't given you an epidural. So it was sort of like, so I'm not in an extraordinarily large amount of pain because... But, yeah, I just actually had no pain from the wound or anything at all, which, woohoo. But having said that, of course, when they initially woke me up, the nurse was right there and like, okay, would you like some morphine? And I just automatically assumed that I was going to need it and just went, So I did have a couple of shots of morphine, but, I didn't need them, which was great. But, of course, to know that it's there and they have no problem giving it to you, of course, is, certainly what you need to know. So a few days on and, the whole sleep's kind of getting to you and all the drugs and the fact that you've just undergone, fairly major surgery and whatnot. And then the delusions start, which is a lot of fun. I remember seeing a nurse running around dressed like a cat and another nurse cooking fish on a barbecue with a boat in the background and just random things like that. And even another lady who had a lung transplant a couple of weeks before me, she for several days thought that she was in some kind of mafia drug cartel. Good old Margot. Yeah, and of course, if we go to the next one, you can see, just going back, facial hair's gone. Because for some reason, a nurse I had a male nurse one day, and he got a little bit bored and decided, let's give you a shave. And I just went, all right, fine. And it just sort of seemed kind of ironic that after spending something like, about $220,000 giving you this operation, they then turn around and spend 20 cents on a cheap, crappy razor to shave your face. But go figure. So 2 weeks later, I'm in Ward 72. Obviously a little less attached to things at this point, finally. And a little less facial hair, as I said. And then, of course, the bezoar reared its ugly head. And, of course, a bezoar is an interesting word, isn't it? This is one of the complications you can get, but not everyone gets. I only know of one other person that has had it, where the main nerve into your stomach post-transplant actually shuts down temporarily, which means that everything that goes into your stomach kind of cements up and becomes a brick, and you can't pass anything and you can't eat. At one point there, even taking a sip of water was, excruciating, and I was severely bloated and whatnot. But, of course, like everything, they have ways to solve that. So there were two ways. One, they could put me back under and put a tube down my throat and clean it all out. Or I could drink lots of that. So you can guess what I did. And sure enough, over the next few weeks, it slowly broke it all down, and I was up and running and eating again. So a few days later, you're up and out of bed a little bit and starting to exercise, getting back into it and getting up and being able to walk. And then after 3 weeks, I was over in Hardytown.